Good afternoon. Welcome to Midday Prime. I'm Shreya Upadhyay. In the next 60 minutes, we'll be getting you everything that is making news right now, starting with Prime Minister Modi addressing the 13th BRICS Summit later in the evening. Remember, this is the third time that India is chairing the BRICS Summit. We'll also get you the latest situation from Afghanistan and, of course, all that is happening back home. This and much more up ahead, but first, the headlines. Union Ministers Rajnath Singh and Nitin Gadkari inaugurate the emergency landing strip at Satta Gandhav stretch on the National Highway 925 in Barmer for the Indian Air Force planes. A Hercules C-130J plane carrying the two ministers and the Chief of Defence Staff Bipin Rawat conducts a mock emergency landing on the National Highway. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh says the highway and landing field along with the infrastructure on the western border of the country will further strengthen the security infrastructure, emphasizes that security and development are complementary to each other. 29 locations have been marked for emergency landing fields in the country. Prime Minister Narendra Modi to chair the 13th BRICS Summit today. The theme under India's chairship is BRICS at 15, intra-BRICS cooperation for continuity, consolidation and consensus. India had outlined 4 priority areas for its chairship. Minister of State for External Affairs Meenakshi Lekhi meets President-elect of the 76th UNGA Abdullah Shahid in New York, discusses COVID vaccines, gender, youth, human rights and environment for the session. Back home in Assam's boat tragedy, 87 passengers rescued so far, 1 woman dead, 2 still missing. Prime Minister expresses grief over the accident, speaks with Assam Chief Minister. Relief and rescue operations underway. In international news, Mexico witnesses a series of strong aftershocks following devastating earthquake that killed 1 person. In other incident, at least 17 patients killed after heavy rainfall caused flooding at a hospital in central Hidalgo state. Mexican army deployed to provide assistance to rescue teams dealing with the disaster. After that, let's begin the bulletin with the big news. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and Union Minister for Road Transport and Highways Nitin Gadkari today inaugurated the emergency landing field in Barmer district of Rajasthan. Now, the duo also witnessed aircraft operations on emergency landing field on National Highway 925 at Gandhav Bhakasar section at south of Barmer. Now, remember, this is the first time that a national highway will be used for emergency landing of aircrafts of the Indian Air Force, including Sukhoi 30 and Jaguar. A Hercules C-130J plane of the Indian Air Force carrying the two ministers and the Chief of Defence Staff Bipin Rawat conducted a mock emergency landing on the national highway. Addressing the event, Rajnath Singh said that as India celebrates Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, the inauguration of the emergency landing field not only provides a sense of security, but also consolidates confidence among the people.
आजादी का यह अमृत महोत्सव मना रहा है। साथ ही 1971 का युद्ध जिसमें हम लोगों ने विजय हासिल की थी, उसका यह स्वर्णिम वर्ष भी यह देश मना रहा है। और आज जहां पर खड़े होकर हम अपना विचार व्यक्त कर रहे हैं, यह स्थान भी 1971 की विजय का यह साक्षी रहा है। और ऐसे में इमरजेंसी लैंडिंग फील्ड का निर्माण मन में तो उत्साह पैदा करता ही है, साथ ही सुरक्षा के प्रति भी मन के अंदर एक विश्वास का भाव पैदा करता है, एक सेंस ऑफ कॉन्फिडेंस पैदा करता है.
Well, Rajnath Singh also said that having an emergency landing field so close to the international border shows that India is always prepared to defend its unity, integrity and sovereignty.
युद्ध चाहे दुश्मन से हो या फिर आपदाओं से, हमारी यह एयरफोर्स सदैव लोगों की अपेक्षाओं की कसौटी पर यह सदैव खरी उतरी है. यह बराबर पहले भी मैंने देखा है जब मैं रक्षा मंत्री नहीं था, और रक्षा मंत्री रहते हुए भी प्रत्यक्ष अपनी आंखों से इसे मैं देख रहा हूं. और बॉर्डर पर भी देश को जब भी जरूरत पड़ी है, इंडियन एयरफोर्स तैयार रहा है, और हमारी आर्मी, नेवी, एयरफोर्स हो, सभी इन सभी के ऊपर देश का पूरा भरोसा है, पूरा विश्वास है.
Addressing the event, Nitin Gadkari said that the government has used modern technology to build the 3-kilometer stretch.
45 करोड़ की लागत से 3 किलोमीटर लंबी एयर स्ट्रिप हमने तैयार की है, जिसके बारे में अभी बताया गया है कि इसकी क्वालिटी बहुत अच्छी है, क्योंकि एयर स्ट्रिप करते समय स्वाभाविक रूप से बहुत मजबूती भी लगती है. ऑस्ट्रेलिया में हमारे भारतीय वैज्ञानिक ने जो आयरन स्लैग है, स्टील स्लैग, इसका यूज करके उन्होंने एयर स्ट्रिप बनाई है, और जिसको ऑस्ट्रेलियन सरकार ने मान्यता दी है. और हमारे देश में ये स्लैग, ये वेस्ट मटेरियल है. तो हम लगातार इनोवेशन और रिसर्च के द्वारा नए नए प्रयोग करते हैं.
Well, speaking with the media after the event, Rajnath Singh said that the National Highway Authority of India is developing emergency landing fields at many places in the country to improve the operational capabilities of the army. He added that the efforts will also help in relief operations during natural disasters.
प्रधानमंत्री जी के निर्देश पर और हमारे सड़क परिवहन मंत्री श्री नितिन गडकरी जी की देखरेख में यह सब सारा काम देश भर में हो रहा है. इससे जहां पर हमारी सेना की ऑपरेशनल कैपेबिलिटी बढ़ेगी, वहीं पर मैं समझता हूं प्राकृतिक आपदा की घड़ी में जनता को राहत पहुंचाने में भी बहुत मदद मिलेगी.
And my colleague Vishal Baristo joins us for more on this very important development that has taken place. Vishal, good afternoon. Extremely important there in strengthening the Indian Air Force and of course, in helping the country when it is struck with natural disaster. An extremely important step there taken by the government in inaugurating an emergency land fielding at Barmer.
Well, absolutely. Very good afternoon to you. And let me tell you, this is a very important day in the military history of our country. And this is one of the first national highways that is being used as the emergency landing field. 12 are in the pipeline. This was the first one. So quite a historic day. And it was quite a sight when Hercules landed along with the defense minister, with the highways minister, surface transport, and also the General Rawat as well, who is the CDS, and along with him, along with them also we saw Sukhois landing and other aircrafts. So definitely this area is going to serve as the auxiliary air base for the Indian Air Force, and it was just give quite a shot in the arm to both the Indian Air Force and Indian Army. So definitely a very big day. Let me tell you that Indian Air Force already has an air base at Nal, which is also in Barmer and very close to the area, but the auxiliary air base would definitely provide an edge, a strategic edge for both our forces, because keeping in mind the developments in the western sector, it is quite an important achievement. In 2017, we saw how Sukhois were landed on the Agra-Lucknow expressway, but that was not a national highway. So this is the first national highway. It is made in record 19 months. And latest technology has been used, as you heard the Surface Transport Minister saying. So quite an achievement for the armed forces as well.
Vishal, of course, very important in improving the operational capabilities of the defence forces of India, and of course, like you mentioned, the kind of border situation that we have seen in the past, it becomes even more important for India to strengthen its defence forces. But also, the defence minister said that 29 other locations have also been identified for this. So really, government focusing a lot on strengthening this and of course spreading it across the country.
Well, absolutely, Shreya. I've been traveling a lot, especially in the border areas of northeastern region and also in Ladakh. So the focus of the Modi government has always been to strengthen infrastructure in the border area, especially because they provide a strategic advantage to our armed forces. At the same time, the infrastructural development, which has been ignored for a very long time, is now being taken care of, and that is why the Modi government is focusing on the border areas. And this national highway, which is used 3 kilometer straight, which has been used as the emergency landing field, would also provide accessibility to the bordering villages in both districts of Rajasthan, that includes Jalore and Barmer. These are the districts which also share their borders with Pakistan. So the accessibility will increase. It would provide better accessibility to the civil area, but at the same time the defense forces will also have a strategic advantage as far as the development situation is concerned. We've seen how the situation is developing in Afghanistan and how Pakistan is reacting to it. So keeping that in mind, this has been quite a historic day, both for Indian Air Force and Indian Army.
Absolutely. Vishal Barrister, thanks very much for joining us with those inputs on a very important development that has taken place, that is India strengthening its Air Force. After that, let's now move on to our developing story. Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will today chair the 13th BRICS Summit. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa grouping is 15 years old. The summit will be held in a virtual format, and the theme under India's chairship is BRICS at 15, intra-BRICS cooperation for continuity, consolidation and consensus. Now, India had outlined 4 priority areas for its chairship. These are reform of the multilateral system, counter-terrorism, using digital and technological tools for achieving sustainable development, and goals and enhancing, of course, people-to-people exchanges. Here's more in this report.
The 13th BRICS Summit under the chairmanship of India will take place on 9th September. This is the 3rd time that India will be hosting the BRICS Summit after 2012 and 2016. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will chair the 13th BRICS Summit on Thursday in virtual format as part of India's ongoing chairship of the 5-nation grouping this year. The meeting will be attended by Russian President Vladimir Putin, Chinese President Xi Jinping, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, and Brazil's Jair Bolsonaro. The summit is expected to focus extensively on the situation in Afghanistan. BRICS is an important grouping bringing together the major emerging economies from the world, comprising 41% of the world population, having 24% of the world GDP. The theme chosen by India for its BRICS chairship is BRICS at 15, intra-BRICS cooperation for continuity, consolidation and consensus. During the year, India has successfully conducted activities including the 2nd edition of the BRICS Trade Fair, a unique event by India amongst the BRICS countries, wherein more than 600 companies from BRICS countries showcased their products and services. As chair, India will work on specific deliverables across all 3 pillars of intra-BRICS cooperation in 2021. Priorities include reform of the multilateral system, counter-terrorism cooperation, enhancing people-to-people exchanges, digital and technological tools for attainment of sustainable development goals. The 3 main pillars of BRICS include political and security, to enhance cooperation and dialogue on issues of global and regional security, developments in the global political space for peace, security and prosperity, economic and financial, to promote economic growth and development for mutual prosperity through the expansion of intra-BRICS cooperation, culture and people-to-people, recognizing the advantages of using technological and digital solutions to qualitatively enrich and enhance intra-BRICS people-to-people contacts. The 13th BRICS Summit under the chairmanship of India coincides with the 15th anniversary of BRICS as reflected in the theme for the summit. In addition to these, the leaders will also exchange views on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and other current global and regional issues. Bureau Report, DD India.
All right, so that was, about what is expected in BRICS Summit. Let me also take you through a brief history of what really, how BRICS started and what really it meant that time and how far it has traveled. Well, in 2006, in July 2006, leaders of BRIC met in Russia. Now remember, South Africa at that time was not part of this grouping, and this grouping met on the margins of the G8 Outreach Summit that happened in July 2006. Now in September 2006, the group was formalized as BRIC as during the first BRIC foreign ministers meeting, which met on the sidelines of the general debate of the UN Assembly in New York City. So that was then. Now, the first BRICS Summit was held in Yekaterinburg in Russia on 16th June 2009. Remember, till now, South Africa was not part of it, and that in 2009, the first BRIC meeting was held, the BRICS Summit. Now, the BRIC group was renamed as BRICS. That is after South Africa joined the grouping, and it was accepted as a full member at the BRIC Foreign Ministers meeting in New York in September 2010. That is when South Africa joined the grouping. Now, South Africa attended the third BRIC Summit in China in 2011. It happened on 14th April 2011, and that's when this final grouping became BRICS. Now, BRICS members comprise 41% of the world population, 24% of the global GDP, and over 16% share in world trade. So very, very significant, these countries coming together, the major emerging economies of the world coming together and finding common solutions to regional problems. Now remember, at this time India hosting the BRICS Summit for the third time. This is after the BRICS Summit that India hosted in 2012 and 2016. So today is going to be the third time that India will be hosting the BRICS Summit, and of course Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be addressing this meeting today. Now, to help us understand more about BRICS and what we can really expect in today's summit with the Prime Minister addressing it, I'm joined by my guest, Mr. S.R. Tayal, who is a former senior diplomat. Good afternoon, Mr. Tayal, and thanks very much for joining us in Midday Prime on DD India. Now, undoubtedly, Mr. Tayal, we are seeing one of the worst humanitarian crises panning out in Afghanistan. We're also seeing very important concerns of terrorism emanating from Afghan soil. So obviously, one of the first topics and one of the larger discussions in today's BRICS Summit will be on the crisis panning out in Afghanistan. And of course, we know that India, Russia and China are close neighbors of Afghanistan, and therefore it becomes all the more important for this grouping to first and foremost discuss the crisis that we are seeing in Afghanistan.
Very much so. If we look at the global background since the 12th summit in Russia in 2019, we have a new president in United States, President Joe Biden, and with the new US administration also, the US differences continue, both with Russia and China. COVID-19 situation continues to affect gravely the economies of the world and of 4 members of BRICS, India, Russia, Brazil and South Africa. China is somewhat less affected, and of course Afghanistan is a new agenda item which has come suddenly and with great force in the consciousness of 3 members who are the neighboring countries, India, China and Russia. Really, if we see in a summit format, the biggest advantage always is that the leaders are able to communicate freely, privately, in their private sessions. Unfortunately, in a virtual format, that advantage is not there, and leaders have to speak from prepared texts. So that is a little bit of a disadvantage, but given that we notice that before the leaders speak, 4 reports will be presented and to the leaders today, And one report is by our National Security Advisor, Shri Ajit Doval. And second will be by President of the New Development Bank, and two on the businesses. But I am sure the report of our National Security Advisor will cover in detail what is happening in Afghanistan and how to deal with the new Taliban government, because we have common concerns. India, the three which are neighbors of Afghanistan, India, China and Russia, all three, we do want that Afghanistan should not become again a sanctuary for terrorists, because China has the Uyghur problem, Russians have the Chechens and Dagestanis, they take refuge in Afghanistan, and of course India, the Tanzeems which are promoted by Pakistan, Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, etc., they find sanctuary and refuge in Afghanistan. So to that extent, there are common concerns. And then, of course, there another issue would be whether humanitarian assistance should be provided to the people of Afghanistan, and what should be the conditionalities, etc.
But Ambassador Dayal, how does one reach a consensus on such an issue? Because we know that while India does have its own concerns, we've also seen China extending a very public support to the Taliban there in Afghanistan, and we also know that Russia also, of course it hasn't officially said anything, but we know that it is sort of also supporting the Taliban forming the government there. How does one reach a consensus in such a grouping then?
It is very clear that China and Pakistan are strongly supporting the present dispensation in Kabul. And China has already announced about $30 million assistance to the new Kabul government, and it's the first country to do so. So yes, we have differences, and I think the way our diplomacy is functioning is to have common cause. The Russian National Security Advisor was here yesterday. Reportedly, CIA Chief Mr. Burns was also here in India. Our foreign minister has been to Iran twice in the last 2 months. So all the neighbors who are concerned about the deteriorating security situation in Afghanistan, India has to liaise with them, work with them, and find the commonalities. And commonalities can be on two grounds. One, again, that just as in the 90s, Afghanistan had become under the Taliban government a refuge and a sanctuary and a hideout for all kinds of terrorists and very disgruntled, violent elements from all over the world. And Osama bin Laden was there, Al-Qaeda was there, everybody was there. So history should not repeat itself, that is one. And then all neighbors, the entire world wants that there should be some kind of an inclusive government in Kabul. But it is very clear that the face of Taliban, which was in Doha, was not the real face of Taliban. When the Doha representatives were negotiating with the United States or Russia or China or any other country, the real face of Taliban has come out now, which is really violent, really vicious. Fighters who have absolutely no respect for human life and have been responsible for killing hundreds of thousands of Afghans and others in Afghanistan. So it will be a very tough road ahead, but we have to talk and harmonize our approach with as many countries as possible.
Right. Ambassador Dayal, also with the COVID-19 pandemic, the world struggling with the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw economies shrinking, we had to rebuild, rethink global supply chains. And now one of the priority areas for India is, of course, reform in the multilateral system. And we want an open, inclusive, multilateral system of trade. How do you see that panning out when it comes to BRICS?
It is very important that the 4 or 5 major economies which are constituents of BRICS harmonize their position, because both World Trade Organization as well as the lending institutions, whether it is World Bank and IMF, they have been found wanting. They have not been able to meet the expectations of the countries where economies have been badly hurt. And still they are dominated by the G7 countries. That is a fact of life. And BRICS, of course, in 2009 and early from 2006 were established in kind of the background of the financial crisis of 2008, because from 2009 the summit level meeting started. So in many ways, BRICS charter is to act as a bridge between the rich West, G7, and the middle countries, as well as the developing countries. And in that, the reform of multilateral institutions, even WHO, it has been found totally wanting in identifying the cause of Wuhan virus, of COVID-19. And it has not been very successful in containing it and giving timely advisories to the member nations. So again, it came under undue influence of China, which was the main culprit in this entire spread of COVID-19 all over the world. So yes, reforms are required, and again, how much consensus is possible, that we will know once the communique is out. But that is a very desirable goal, and all the developing countries will be looking at what BRICS countries decide to do as a common approach to reform the multilateral institutions, which will affect their daily lives of our own citizens, whether it is World Bank, whether it is the International Monetary Fund, WHO, World Trade Organization.
All right, Ambassador S.R. Dayal, thanks very much for joining us on Midday Prime on DD India and sharing your perspective on what we can expect in today's BRICS Summit.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to our National Prime segment. Now, in Majuli Jorhat boat capsized incident of Assam, preliminary reports of the state government said that 87 people have survived the boat tragedy near Nimati Ghat in Jorhat. The report said that Jorhat-bound boat collided with a Majuli-bound boat at around 4 p.m. on Wednesday. The Majuli-bound boat immediately capsized with passengers on board. The report includes death of one person from Guwahati, while 7 others were shown as missing till last evening. Meanwhile, the capsized boat has been located at a distance of about 1.5 kilometers away from the place of incident, and no dead body has been found inside. 8 people are currently being treated at the Jorhat Medical College and Hospital. President Ramnath Kovind, Vice President Venkaiah Naidu and Prime Minister Narendra Modi expressed their grief and prayed for the safe rescue of the missing people. Prime Minister Modi spoke with the Assam Chief Minister and inquired about the progress of the rescue operations at Nimati Ghat and the condition of those who were injured. My colleague Mridhu Smita is joining us from Assam to get us the latest ground situation there. Mridhu Smita, good afternoon. Extremely unfortunate incident in Assam. Of course, relief and rescue operations are underway, and we know that 87 people have been rescued. What is the latest update today, and what about the missing people?
Yes, as per the latest update, the number of missing people has come down to 2 now. Because others are being already rescued, and 1 person that have been already reported as dead. So far, the rescue operations are still on for the 2 persons who are still missing, as the SDRF and NDRF personnel have deployed deep divers on the river. The Chief Minister of Assam have visited this incident, the site there, where he met with the people who were rescued from there, and again, while talking to the media, he have announced pretty many points for looking into the incident, because the nick of the time, the very much needed thing is that a bridge to Majuli, because the only way of reaching Majuli is through the river that Brahmaputra, and from Nimati Ghat, from there they have to take a ferry to reach Majuli. And since due to floods, due to last few many days, the ferry services were stopped because there have been reports of too much of water, as I have already in the last few days have been reporting that Nimati Ghat was like the river was flowing over the danger level mark. Though the ferry services got resumed the day before, and yesterday this incident happened. Yes, there have been loopholes from the administration, officials of the inland water transport, and because of which such incident could not be denied that incident has happened. Even yesterday, the Inland Water Minister of Assam, Chandramohan Patwari, while visiting the place, he took stock of the situation, and there itself three engineers of the department were suspended because they were quite reluctant of the work that they should be doing, because definitely in such a the people have to be quite cautious. They have to follow the safety measures as well.
Right, Mridusmita, you said that regular ferry operations are have started.
It was started after it was stopped because of the flood. But now again it has been stopped, and Chief Minister, as he visited the incident site today, he has announced that the private boats that were operating there, those private boats were banned because they are flying using only one engine, which is a dangerous thing, because if we talk about the river Brahmaputra out there, so he have suggested that these boats, because definitely this is the livelihood of the people who definitely depends on the private boats as well, the government ferries as well. So he have asked his private boats to install marine engines, that is 2 engines, so that and it will be supported by the government because they will give subsidy to install that particular engine.
All right.
And he has already assured that from November itself, the construction of the bridge will be started, and within 4 years the bridge will be completed. This is a great move from the state of Assam that the Chief Minister has assured so far.
All right, Mridusmita, thanks very much for joining us with those inputs on the very unfortunate boat tragedy that took place in Assam yesterday. Now moving on, an update on the flood situation in Bihar. A population of over 15 lakh in 1,270 villages of 13 districts remain flood affected. The situation remains grim in Saharsa, Samastipur and Purnia, where the many houses have been washed away in the heavy flow of Kosi, Burhi, Gandak and Parman and other rivers. The soil erosion has increased as the rivers are receding. 6 teams of NDRF and 9 teams of SDRF are engaged in relief work. 496 people are still living in 5 shelter homes. Over 14 lakh people are being given 2 square meals through 251 community kitchens. Over 1,700 boats have been deployed in the flood-affected areas for the purpose of transportation and reaching the relief to the affected population. An update now on the COVID-19 situation across the country. India's fight against COVID-19 continues. 40,567 patients have recovered in the last 24 hours, and it has increased the total recoveries to 3,23,04,618. The country's recovery rate currently stands at 97.48%. In the last 24 hours, 43,263 new cases were reported in the country. The active caseload stands at 3,93,614. The active cases account for 1.19% of the total cases. The weekly positivity rate remains below 3% for the last 76 days and is now at 2.43%. The daily positivity rate remains less than 3% for the last 10 days and is currently at 2.38%. Meanwhile, testing, it continues in full pace in the country. In the last 24 hours, 18,17,639 samples were tested for COVID-19. A total of 53,68,17,243 samples have been tested across the country. Now, so far, over 70.63 crore doses have been provided to states and union territories, and more than 96 lakh doses are in the pipeline. More than 5.58 crore balance and unutilized COVID-19 vaccine doses are still available with states and UTs that can be administered. Now, in a landmark achievement, India's COVID-19 vaccination coverage has crossed 71 crore milestone. Over 71.65 crore vaccine doses have been administered so far under the nationwide vaccination drive, out of which 86,51,701 vaccine doses have been administered in the last 24 hours. Moving on, Vice President Venkaiah Naidu today inaugurated the campus of SRM Institute of Science and Technology in Chennai via video conferencing. Underlining the importance of the quality education in creating a new, resurgent and aspirational India, the Vice President called for increasing employability of the students passing out of our universities and colleges. In this regard, he emphasized the need for building a stronger academia-industry connection and focusing on the skills that are required for the industry.
Prime Minister has given a three-line mantra. We all must think about it, reform, perform and transform, transformation of the nation. Through education, through technology, through various measures, and see to it that India is transformed fully and becomes a strong, stable, prosperous, happy nation.
Well, lauding the Tokyo Paralympians for their exemplary performance, the Vice President also encouraged the youth of the country to double the medal count in the Paris Olympics. He also urged all stakeholders, including the private sector, to build an all-encompassing support system for our young and aspiring athletes.
This is a historic moment in India's sports journey, and their exemplary performance. The achievements in Tokyo has not only changed people's perception towards disability, but has also kindled hopes of India emerging as a major sporting power. Let us set a target for ourselves to double the medal count in Paris Olympics in 2024 and lose no time in trying to achieve.
Moving on, a delegation led by Union Home Minister Amit Shah today called on President Ramnath Kovind. The delegation presented the 10th volume of the report of the Parliamentary Committee on Official Language. In other news, the Election Commission has announced bypolls for 6 Rajya Sabha seats, including 2 in Tamil Nadu and 1 seat each in Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, West Bengal and Assam. Polling in these states will be held on the 4th of October. The notification will be issued on the 15th of September. The seats fell vacant after 5 MPs resigned from the post, while 1 parliamentarian from Maharashtra passed away. The Election Commission has also announced biennial election to fill up 1 Rajya Sabha seat from Puducherry, which fell vacant due to the retirement of the sitting MP N. Gokulakrishnan. It will be held on the 4th of October. In addition, the poll body has also announced a by-election for a Bihar Legislative Assembly seat, which is also scheduled for the 4th of October. And after that, in Midday Prime, it's time for news and updates from the world of business. Well, my colleague Tanvi is getting us all the latest updates from business. Good afternoon, Tanvi. Over to you.
Thank you, Shreya. Very good afternoon to you. Encouraging news coming in Business Prime. The world is putting an unprecedented faith in the Indian economy as more than a quarter, that is 26% of the total foreign portfolio investment, FPI equity inflow in India over the last 30 years came in 2020-21. Data from the National Securities Depository Limited NSDL showed that FPI equity assets soared to a record $650 billion at the end of August this year. FPI asset had been $255 billion in the year ago period, and this 26% growth has been attributed to the rally in the domestic equity markets and sustained inflows over the past 12 months. FPIs accounted for nearly 1/5 of India's market capitalization of over $3.5 trillion in August. And the Department of Economic Affairs of the Finance Ministry has released the monthly economic review for the month of August. The report said that a broad-based rebound in several leading macroeconomic indicators in July and August offer bright prospects for India's continued economic recovery from the pandemic. The V-shaped economic recovery remains intact, with more than 90% recovery made from the pre-pandemic first quarter output of 2019-20. Agriculture sector continues to offer comfortable prospects, with Kharif sowing at normal levels despite a 9% deficient monsoon so far this year. India's PMI composite index, including both manufacturing and services, is comfortably placed at 55.4, signaling commencement of economic expansion. Industrial sector registers a growth of 46%, while mining recorded 18.6% growth. Consumption grew by 13.8%, investment by 55.3%, exports by 49.1%, while imports grew by 60.2%. On to stock market news now. The domestic benchmark indices have turned flat after opening lower on Thursday. So the Sensex at the BSE had lost 38 points, 0.1% to 58,218 in afternoon deals a short while ago. And the Nifty at the National Stock Exchange had declined 13 points, 0.1% to 17,339. But in the broader market, the BSE mid-cap index had advanced 0.3% and the small-cap index had climbed 0.4%. Other key Asian markets were set for their worst day in 2 weeks on Thursday, weighed down by the latest regulatory crackdown in China and global investors' worries about a looming reduction in the US central bank stimulus. So MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan was last down 1.3%, which would be its worst daily performance since August the 19th. Hong Kong was among the biggest fallers, shedding over 2%, dragged down particularly by Chinese tech stocks. Back home at the interbank forex market, the rupee had slipped 25 paise against the dollar in opening trade on Tuesday amid subdued domestic stock markets. Later in afternoon deals, the rupee had appreciated 3 paise to 73 rupees 57 paise against the dollar. At the multi-commodity exchange, gold had dropped 143 rupees to 46,895 rupees per 10 grams. Silver had lost 193 rupees to 63,965 rupees per kilo in afternoon deals. Very quickly onto the global energy market now. Global crude oil prices rose for a second session on Thursday, recovering from earlier losses as a decline in the US Gulf of Mexico output following damages from Hurricane Ida underpinned the market. So Brent crude added 23 cents or 0.3% to $72.83 a barrel. US crude rose 15 cents or 0.2% to $69.45 a barrel. That's it from the world of business for the moment. For other updates coming from the world, let's go back to Shreya. Shreya, back to you.
Tanvi, thanks very much for all those updates from the world of business. And now, let's have a look at what's making news across the globe. Well, For nearly 2 weeks, the Kabul airport bombing that killed 13 Americans, the remains of the 2 U.S. servicemen killed in the attack have arrived in their respective hometowns. The suicide bombing took place on the 26th of August just outside the gates of Kabul airport, where thousands of people had gathered to try to get on a flight out after the Taliban returned to power in Afghanistan on the 15th of August. Naval medic Maxton Soviak and Marine Lance Corporal Jared Schmitz were posthumously awarded the Purple Hearts for their service, along with the 11 other service members who were killed in the attack. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas held a ministerial meeting on Afghanistan with more than 20 allies and partners. In attendance were representatives of India, UK, European Union, NATO, the UN, besides others. Secretary Blinken urged strong unity in making clear that we will expect the Taliban to live up to their public commitments of inclusivity, safe passage, human rights and combating terrorism. Speaking on the evacuation, Blinken said the United States was doing everything in its power to get the flights off the ground, but the Taliban was not permitting the flights to depart.
As of now, the Taliban are not permitting the charter flights to depart. The bottom line is this: those flights need to be able to depart. And we will work every day to make sure that they're able to do that. We will continue to press the Taliban to allow the charters to leave, and also, critically, to open HKIA, the Hamid Karzai International Airport, to the regular flow of civilian aircraft, which can enable the safe and orderly departure of people from Afghanistan.
Well, my colleague Amrit Pal is joining us for more on this. Amrit, good afternoon. You know, words not matching actions, even as the world is still talking about how it expects the Taliban to hold true to its words and act upon its words of inclusivity. We are seeing something very different on the ground. First of all, we have not seen an inclusive government, caretaker government that the Taliban announced. We're also seeing very opposing actions on the ground when it comes to safe passage and Afghan soil not being used for terrorism.
Yes, Shreya, you're right that, you know, the sort of inclusive government or the representative government that the world was expecting, and Taliban was also saying that they will bring in an inclusive government. One hasn't seen much of that, though there are some Uzbeks in the government and one Tajik. About only 4 Uzbek and Tajiks are in the new government, including the Deputy Prime Minister Abdul Hanafi, who's a ethnic Uzbek. But one hasn't seen representation of, say, the Hazaras, who are a significant minority there. They are about 10% of the population. Or one hasn't seen women in the newly announced cabinet. It is primarily the old guard of the Taliban, which is Pashtun dominated. Antony Blinken's words are very telling when he says that the actions of the Taliban don't inspire much confidence, but he still hopes that they will allow safe passage. The Taliban does not have a problem really with safe passage of the foreigners who wish to leave. It is their essential problem is with Afghans who wish to leave. That is for 2 reasons. One, they believe that Afghans should be utilized they need the Afghans to take on, you know, holding, say, flying airplanes, running airfields, running the finance ministry, running the technical institutions and things like that. So the Taliban does not simply have the capacity, because they have been fighting a war for so long. They haven't really done the kind of administration that modern administration requires. They haven't played those roles. They have been in control of some areas of South Afghanistan, even during the Karzai rule or the Ashraf Ghani rule, but one hasn't seen a modern, they don't have the expertise or the capacity to run a problem, and that's why they're stopping Afghans. The second, of course, is that they want to contain instill that confidence in the world that, well, they are our people, we will take care of them, and they should stay inside Afghanistan. Because if they, take flight out of Afghanistan, it brings in a certain, it portrays a certain image of Afghanistan being a totalitarian state where people don't feel safe. So those are the reasons why they do not wish Afghans to leave, including the minorities. But apart from that, yes, their actions on the ground remain true to their core identity. They have already said that they wish to impose Sharia, and they want to operate out of that matrix. And that's what they're doing.
Right. Amrit, amid all of this, we also know that the US has intensified its diplomacy in Germany to press Taliban to really, hold true to its words. We're also seeing, in the latest development, China has pledged about $31 million as financial aid to the newly formed Taliban government in Afghanistan. And we also know that today we have the 13th BRICS Summit. With Afghanistan, of course, the crisis panning out there being one of the topics, significant topics which will be discussed. So really, different responses from different countries. India, of course, has its own concerns when it comes to the Afghan soil being used for terrorism. It has made it clear. We also know that there have been many protests in Afghanistan when it comes to Pakistan involvement in this whole situation. The common people are protesting against it. How do we see all of this? The US pressing Taliban in terms of its diplomacy, China and Russia backing Taliban, and the whole BRICS Summit happening today.
Well, first, to the international conferences that are happening. These are international efforts, be what happened in Ramstein or what's happening in what India is hosting the 13th BRICS Summit, though virtually. Essentially, what the world is trying to do is the world is trying to exert influence and pressure on the Taliban government to have a more inclusive government which takes care of human rights, which is sensitive to women's rights, to rights of minorities, etc. in Afghanistan. And second, most importantly, for people for countries whose people are still in Afghanistan, allowing safe passage for them. So those are the one can see these calls related to that. Also, there's an unsaid pressure of what sort of recognition that the world may be ready to give Taliban, the diplomatic recognition, and open some sort of engagement with them. We know Taliban badly needs the money. Their international donors have frozen the money flow into that country, and that country, even during the Ashraf Ghani regime, or the previous regime of Hamid Karzai, used to 80% of their budget comes from its international donors, because that country has been perpetually at war and hasn't built its capacity in terms of industries, in terms of other economic activities. So they badly need the money. So that is the leverage that the international community is trying to assert by holding these conferences and making these calls. As far as concerns, or as far as Russia and China is concerned, they've made some diplomatic overtures to them. There are a few of the handful countries which still have embassies running in Kabul, but they've also made it conditional that the Taliban will have to, crack down on terrorism and assure the world that the Afghan soil should not be used for terrorist activities which affect the world. India has its concerns in Jammu and Kashmir, but so does China and Russia.
Absolutely. All right, Amritpal, thanks very much for joining us with those inputs on the latest situation in Afghanistan. We'll have to see how that pans out. All right, moving on, in more news from Mexico, the country is witnessing severe flooding, which has led to the deaths of 17 people, most of whom had COVID-19, at a hospital in the central Mexican state of Hidalgo. According to weathermen, torrential rains caused the river Tula to burst its banks. The Mexican government said in a statement that more than 40 other patients in the public hospital in the town of Tula were evacuated by emergency service workers, and an initial assessment showed about 2,000 houses had flood damage. Well, thousands of Greeks on Wednesday bid farewell to Mikis Theodorakis, a world-renowned activist and musician whose work brought Greek culture to a global audience in the latter 20th century. The Theodorakis, whose musical score for the 1964 movie Zorba the Greek helped foster a carefree image of Greece abroad for millions. He has passed away on the 2nd of September at the age of 96. The funeral and burial are to be held on the island of Crete, where his parents are buried and according to his wishes. And after that, it's time for everything that is making news in the world of sports. Well, Samriddhi is getting us all the latest excitement from the world of sports. Samriddhi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Shreya, and welcome everyone to Sports Prime. Well, to begin with, Prime Minister Narendra Modi hosted the Indian Paralympic contingent today. The 2020 Summer Paralympics in Tokyo proved to be the most successful season for India yet, with athletes securing a total of 19 medals, 5 gold, 8 silver and 6 bronze. Now, India got 2 gold medals each in badminton and shooting, while 1 gold in athletics. The morale of the Paralympic players was also boosted by Prime Minister Modi from time to time. The Prime Minister also spoke to many players who had not won the medals and encouraged them for future endeavours. Youth Sports and Youth Affairs and Sports Minister Anurag Singh Thakur has expressed gratitude to Prime Minister Narendra Modi for his constant support and encouragement towards India's Paralympians. In a tweet, the minister said, "Thank you, Prime Minister Modi, for unclinching encouragement towards India's Paralympians. This is building momentum towards transforming India into a sporting powerhouse." India have named a 15-man squad for the upcoming T20 World Cup in the UAE and Oman. Virat Kohli will lead the side with Rohit Sharma as his vice-captain. The tournament will get underway from October 17 with the final to be played in Dubai on November 14. Spinner Ravichandran Ashwin is included for his first international T20 call-up in 4 years, despite not playing in any of India's tests against England so far this summer. Now, former India captain MS Dhoni will act as the team's mentor for the tournament, and the squad Argentine fans queued up in the rain to buy tickets ahead of the 2022 World Cup Argentina-Bolivia qualifier to be played on Thursday in the capital, Buenos Aires. The game comes after World Soccer's governing body FIFA opened disciplinary proceedings into Sunday's Brazil versus Argentina World Cup qualifier, which was abandoned after 5 minutes amid farcical scenes. Brazilian health authorities invaded the pitch to stop the game after accusing 4 of Argentina's English Premier League players of violating the country's COVID-19 quarantine rules. Brazil led the South American qualifying group for Qatar 2022, 6 points ahead of the second-placed Argentina. The top 4 qualify automatically for the World Cup. Well, that's all from Sports Prime for now. Back to you, Shreya.
Thanks so much, Samriddhi, for all the updates. And in fact, it was the first for an Indian Prime Minister to meet our Paralympians. It's been a big boost to their confidence and morale. Thanks very much, Samriddhi, again for joining us with all those updates. And now it's time for our next segment, which is Life Prime, where we bring you stories from the world of art, culture, cinema, science and innovation. Stories that are bringing smiles, stories that are changing lives. Well, Nikifor Ivanov, who lives in Yakutsk, which is a Siberian city built on permafrost, grew a breed of frost-resistant apples, which are the size of berries. Now, since the weather conditions in Yakut are extreme, local plants had to adapt to such environment by decreasing their size. This was observed by local biologists back in Soviet times, and a new breed of dwarf apples perfectly fit into a matchbox was born. Now, before we end this edition of Midday Prime, we leave you with these glimpses of this unique fruit. Take a look. Thank you very much for joining us today. News and updates continue on DD India. Bye-bye.
Bye.